1. Intro. What if the strongest man you know is the one breaking in silence? And what if the only person who sees it is the woman everyone overlooks? Before we go deeper, make sure you subscribe to Hidden Angle Podcast, because this story will change how you look at quiet hearts forever. 2. The world and their first collision. Adrian lived in a world built like a fortress, polished glass, guarded elevators, people who spoke to him with rehearsed confidence. Power followed him everywhere, yet so did a silence he never learned how to escape. Every decision he made was sharp, calculated, almost cold. People admired him, feared him, depended on him, but no one truly saw him. Eva stepped into that world quietly, almost like she didn't belong, except she carried a softness that unsettled every hard edge around him. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't intimidated by wealth or titles. She simply moved with a quiet purpose, as if kindness was something she didn't have to perform, it was just who she was. Their first collision wasn't dramatic. No grand music, no slow motion. She walked into his office gently, holding a fresh set of towels, and offered him a polite, almost apologetic smile. It lasted less than a second, but something inside him stilled, just enough for him to feel the weight he'd been ignoring. Most people smiled at Adrian because they wanted something from him: opportunity, favor, access. But her smile didn't ask for anything. It simply was. For a moment, his world, the one built on control, deadlines, and pressure, felt strangely human. He noticed details he had never looked for: the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when nervous, the faint tiredness under her eyes, the quiet steadiness in her breath. He tried to dismiss it, tried to look away. But that small moment felt like someone had opened a window in a room he'd been suffocating in. Eva, unaware of the impact, continued her task with calm efficiency. She wasn't performing for him. She wasn't thinking about him at all. And maybe that was why he couldn't stop thinking about her. In a world full of people fighting to be seen, she was the only one who seemed comfortable being invisible. And that was exactly what made him notice her. 3. The unseen pain he hides. People looked at Adrian and saw certainty, a man built from steel, success, and impossible standards. But strength can be the cruelest disguise. It makes the world assume you're unbreakable. It makes people forget to ask if you're tired or hurting. And Adrian had mastered the art of appearing fine. His pain didn't announce itself. It lived in small, nearly invisible places. In the way he stared at his untouched coffee every morning. In the quiet sigh he released before opening another meeting. In the way his jaw tightened whenever someone mentioned family, as if the word itself could cut him. He carried his past like a silent injury, one no one ever saw. Because he made sure they never did. There was a framed photo on his desk he kept face down, as if turning it over might release all the memories he'd spent years burying. When the office was empty, he'd pick it up, look at it for half a second, and put it back before the emotion could reach his eyes. Adrian lived his life as if vulnerability was a debt he refused to owe anyone. And yet, Eva noticed. She noticed the little cracks people overlooked, the dark circles he tried to hide behind clean lines and expensive suits. The way he rubbed the bridge of his nose when he was overwhelmed. The way he inhaled sharply, not in anger, but in fear of saying something real. She never commented. She never asked. But she saw. Once, she passed by his study and heard the faintest sound, a breath that broke midway. Like someone trying not to fall apart. When she stepped inside, he wasn't crying. Men like Adrian don't cry in the open. He was just sitting there, staring at nothing, the weight of everything pressing on his shoulders. He straightened the moment he saw her, as if pain was something he needed to hide out of respect. But Eva didn't rush to leave. She just softly placed a fresh glass of water on his desk, met his eyes for a heartbeat, and then quietly stepped away. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sympathy. It was acknowledgement, gentle, unobtrusive, deeply human. For a man who spent his life surrounded by people who wanted power from him, money from him, decisions from him, this small act of being seen without being demanded from felt unfamiliar, unsettling, almost terrifying. Pain makes you push the world away. But sometimes, the right presence, calm, patient, undemanding, makes the world feel safe enough to let a little softness in. And Adrian, without realizing it, had started letting Eva into the places he guarded most fiercely. The quiet places. The hidden places. The wounded places. The ones he thought no one would ever reach. For, the moment he breaks. It happened on a night that looked ordinary, nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just the soft hum of the house and the weight of a day that had taken too much from him. Adrian sat alone in his study, the room dimly lit, shadows collecting in every corner like unspoken truths. He had held himself together for so long that even breathing felt like a discipline. Eva knocked gently before entering, expecting to straighten a few things and leave. But the moment she stepped in, she sensed it. Something in the air had shifted. His posture wasn't the usual controlled confidence. His shoulders were lower, almost defeated, his eyes distant, unfocused, as if he were staring into a place he didn't want to return to. He didn't look at her when he spoke. He just whispered, "Why do you keep smiling at me?" It wasn't accusation. It wasn't frustration. It was pain, raw, stripped of armor, fragile in a way she had never seen. Eva froze for a moment, but not out of fear. She was witnessing something a man like Adrian never let the world see. She stepped closer, gently, as if approaching a wounded animal. When she finally answered, her voice was soft enough to not scare the moment away. "Because you look like you need someone too." His breath caught, not because of her words, but because of the truth in them. No one had ever dared to say he needed anything, much less comfort. His entire life was built on the belief that vulnerability meant failure. For the first time, the mask slipped. He pressed his palms against his eyes, and a quiet, broken sound escaped him, barely audible, but powerful enough to collapse the walls he'd spent years maintaining. He didn't cry, he just let himself exist without pretending. Eva didn't reach out, she didn't offer clichés or false comfort. She simply stood there, giving him space to break without falling apart. Sometimes breaking isn't loud. Sometimes it's the moment someone finally stops pretending they're okay. And in that dimly lit room, with a woman who expected nothing from him, Adrian allowed himself to be human, just for a moment.
Your steps are heavier
5.
now.
The truth she hides. Eva had always moved through the world as if she owed it an apology. Quiet steps, gentle smiles, a softness that made people underestimate her. They saw her kindness but never questioned its cost. They saw her calm but never wondered what it took to maintain it. And that was exactly how she preferred it, because her truth wasn't something she knew how to share. She had learned early that life could take things from you without warning. A dream, a person, a future you thought was certain. And when it did, the only shield she had left was her smile, small, polite, practiced enough to hide the tremor beneath it. Her smile wasn't innocence, it was armor. Adrian never asked about her past, but certain moments made him pause. The way she froze when someone raised their voice, even if it wasn't directed at her. The way she flinched at unexpected sounds, then pretended she hadn't. The way her eyes softened when seeing someone else in pain, as if she recognized it too easily. One evening, he noticed her standing in the hallway, clutching the silver necklace around her neck. Her expression was distant, not sad. but haunted, like someone remembering something they never agreed to recall. And for the first time, it struck him, she wasn't just gentle. She was surviving. He didn't approach her. He didn't ask questions. He simply watched, realizing that the woman who held his broken pieces so carefully had fractures of her own. Eva carried guilt she never spoke of, grief she never named, and memories she never revisited unless they forced their way in. She hid it not because she wanted to, but because she didn't know what would happen if she stopped. If she let go, if she allowed someone to see the weight she carried. People thought Adrian was the one who needed saving. But sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one holding the loudest pain. And in the soft glow of the hallway light, as she blinked away something she wouldn't allow to become a tear, Adrian understood. Her smile wasn't just kindness. It was the way she kept herself from falling apart. And maybe, the reason she saw his pain so clearly was because she had spent years trying to hide her own. 6. When two broken souls finally meet. There was no single moment when their stories intertwined, no dramatic confession. No sudden spark. It happened the way real healing does, quietly, gradually, like two shadows learning to overlap without meaning to. Adrian and Eva never talked about their pain, yet somehow they kept finding each other in the space between words. He began noticing the way she lingered for a second longer when she sensed he'd had a hard day. She didn't ask questions, she simply existed beside him with a calmness that softened the room. And she noticed how he started waiting for her footsteps in the hallway, as if her presence alone steadied the thoughts he couldn't control. They never agreed to trust one another. Trust was something that slipped in through the cracks. Like the night he found her in the kitchen, sitting quietly at the counter, staring at a mug she hadn't touched. She looked up, startled, then apologized as if taking up space was a crime. Adrian didn't say anything, he just sat down across from her. Two people who had spent their lives making themselves small suddenly had someone who didn't need them to shrink. He saw at first, the way her shoulders seemed to drop when she realized he wasn't expecting anything from her. No role to play, no mask to hold, just existence. And she felt it too, the way his breathing steadied when she was near. Like her presence gave him permission to stop carrying the world for a minute. They didn't call it comfort. They didn't call it connection. They simply shared moments that didn't demand explanations. Sometimes she made tea and left a cup for him, saying nothing. Sometimes he walked her to the door after a long day, not because he had to, but because silence felt different with her, a kind of silence that didn't echo. Two broken souls don't heal each other by force. They heal by standing close enough that the other person feels less alone. And in those gentle, unspoken exchanges, cups of tea, shared silence, soft glances, they found something neither of them had expected. A place where their wounds didn't need to hide. And their hearts didn't need to pretend. 7. The message that stays. In the end, their story isn't about saving each other. It's about discovering that even the quietest heart deserves a place to rest. Adrian learned that strength isn't the absence of pain, it's the courage to finally feel it. And Eva learned that hiding your wounds doesn't make you whole, letting someone gently see them does. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that softness is not weakness. Leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe to Hidden Angle Podcast for more untold stories that heal in unexpected ways.